system also fears strong communities as well. For example, the community grows its own food, doesn't panic during shortages, everything is self-sustaining. People fear that.
Your boyfriend was cheating, you know how to find. You will turn the internet upside down trying to find out if you're legit. But you won't do your due diligence to check out and see if this person is really legit.
How the world pushes us to be independent, but in the process disconnects us from one thing that actually keeps us strong, which is community. We've been taught to do everything alone, not to need anyone, and to believe that success is a solo mission. But the truth really is, the more isolated we become, the more we depend on systems that don't always have our best interest at heart. This episode is about breaking that cycle. It's about remembering the real strength, real support, and real freedom that comes from the community that you build, not the institutions that you rely on. We're going to talk about how community protects us, empowers us, and gives us the kind of stability no system can replace.
Let's go.
We're encouraged to stand alone instead of standing together. We're told as we're younger, figure it out yourself. Might show you one time, but you got to figure it out. Instead of learning from people or leaning on people who care about you. One of the things that comes to mind for me is learning how to tie your shoe. They showed me a couple of times, and if I had to walk around with my shoelaces out and if I tripped, you're going to learn today, and you had to figure it out. You had to figure it out. But here's the thing. Now, again, it's community adjacent-esque. And now you have, for example, the shoes that have the Velcro. Now you're dependent on this institution. I'm reaching, but you are depending on a particular process instead of learning how to do something on your own. So what if the Velcro no longer sticks?
The Velcro no longer sticks. Then, so what if they stop making Velcro shoes? Let's go there.
Yeah.
You never learn how to tie a shoe.
It's something that you're dependent on. Now you're singled out because you don't know how, which is where community comes in. They teach you.
Instead of doing it alone. Right. For me, you know me, I'm always going to see patterns. You got the modern culture praises people who do things individually. So you get the person who never asks for help. So then they improvise. Instead of learning how to tie your shoe, you create a Velcro shoe, right? That could be something like a modern way. A person who doesn't ask for help. A person who works through burnout. A person who says, I don't need anybody. A person who cuts everybody off and calls and protecting my peace. Hey, that's me. I will cut you off to protect my peace. I mean, it's so true though, because before in our culture, when we were younger, you didn't really do that. It was kind of like you had to face it. You would always come together. You would argue. You would fight it out. Or if you decided not to speak, at some point, you're going to end up at a family function, a barbecue, Thanksgiving, Christmas. So you got to talk to this person. You got to approach this person at some point. You're not going to be able to evade them for too long. But nowadays, it's not like that. It's like, okay, I'll have Thanksgiving at my house. I'll just cook.
But then as we always say, to camp on what you're saying, bringing it back as far as community based, because you are no longer with, say, said family, whatever that means to you, that's where that whole Friendsgiving comes into play as far as community. So it comes back to that. A lot of people now, instead of being at home on that day for whatever reason, now you're finding, here we go, community, whether you're getting together with your community that you want to be with, maybe the day before, the day after, and then you have to go to said family for whatever reason. But there is that community, again, that protects us, empowers us, and you have that stability of a community that embraces you where you want to belong. So that does it.
That's a valid point. It really is, because the Friendsgiving, you end up adopting a secondary family.
Absolutely.
That's good in cases when it's not necessarily protecting your peace per se. If you're separating from your family because of toxic people or toxic traumatic situations.
And distance wise.
For me, I'm like, I don't want to spell it out. Sometimes you have things that happen in your family that they kind of put it under the rug, but they shouldn't. They should be doing something else.
Right.
But they don't. Because what happens in this house stays in this house. Bad part of it.
Yes.
That's the one I'm talking about. So when we're talking about toxic people, traumatic circumstances, definitely get it. I am not saying don't separate from your family, especially if they don't want to acknowledge something that has happened. Right. But when does isolation become the image of strength? When did it become that image of strength? Or because everybody is alone, everybody becomes easier to sell to, manage, influence, and pressure. It's like almost, it's good in some instances, but it can also be bad in other instances, because sometimes that separation is not good for you because you haven't really adapted. I'm just saying it's not always good. Sometimes it can be a bad thing.
still staying on the same topic, of course, but something simple as even childcare, because you don't have that close-knit community. And I don't mean close-knit in the terms of anything bad, but I remember when I was raising my kids, we all worked. So there wasn't anybody to watch the kids. And when my grandmother watched my daughter, after a while, my grandmother got older and my daughter got older, and she couldn't chase her around and do all that. And she also needed to be interactive with other kids, again, community within her realm. We were forced to get daycare, which was not. So again, one of those institutions that you're dependent on as opposed to having community. So it would have been great to drop her off at some community place or whatever, cousins, moms, dads, or what have you, but they all were working. So that was not an option. So again, the system that works or doesn't work, it has to work, if that makes any sense.
I hate to always go dark on this, but
well, yeah, I'm seeing a pattern, but it's okay. Let's go.
Yeah, because sometimes I understand it, right?
Right.
Because the reason why there's so many people have become individualistic or creating these subset families instead of connecting to that parent family. We used to all come together, either on your mother's side, father's side, but there's usually an umbrella and everybody come together.
Correct.
But a lot of times when grandma or grandpa pass away, unfortunately, it has whittled down to individual homes having their own things going on, and nobody collectively takes care of the family anymore like they used to.
We used to do Sunday dinners when my grandmother got to the point where it was too much for her and carried it on.
Nobody carried it on. And it could be as simple as a disagreement or something was said that caused a fight, and then you got years of separation. When grandma, Mima, or mama, whatever you call it, Medea was here. Medea made sure, we ain't doing this.
Yep.
Y'all handle it. Come here, y'all handle it. And you forced to handle it. You forced to work through it, at least for that day. At least for that day. That does not happen a lot anymore. We cool with just, I ain't got to go over there. I ain't got to deal with them. We can have it over here. We got some new friends. When this is our family, you do your thing. It can be bad, or it can be a situation where, like you were saying with the daycare thing, but then I disagree with regards to, yes, grandma, because my grandmother watched my son, definitely God sent, because him being the way he was brought into this world, he couldn't go to a daycare. Was unable to go to a daycare. And the doctors told me, if you have to put your child into a daycare because he was born premature and with the lung capacity, he was going to be sick. He would be hospitalized quite frequently because he was susceptible to getting sick. So luckily I had my grandmother that was willing to keep him up until he was at an age where he didn't need a daycare.
Oh, that was a blessing for sure.
It was a blessing because they were like, it would be best for you to stay home his first couple of years if you can, and keep him at home or first 3 years. But I couldn't. I had to work.
Right.
So my grandmother was, thank God my grandmother could do it. His great grandmother. Yeah.
A lot of times people will, I guess I'm thinking also as far as you don't realize sometimes what you have or what you had until we're looking back and talking about it. Yeah. Even the babysitter that we had, for example, I remember Bernice, she was like a grandmother type, and she only, and I mean, this was like 20 plus years, I'll just say 30, my kids are old, plus years ago, but she only charged us $11 a day. And that was for 2 kids.
Wow.
Yeah. Because she did it because she genuinely loved kids.
Right.
And she helped my daughter as far as learning how to walk. Because, you do all you can for the first one because it's new. The second one, yeah.
Like, wait a minute.
And that's kind of like how it was. But yeah, she was very instrumental in my kids' upbringing, for sure. And that was definitely a community of such, because a lot of the parents of that, I mean, all these kids are in their 30s now. And in some form or fashion, we all circle back and we see how each is doing. I mean, these are grown kids now with their own families. That tribe, that community has still stayed somewhat connected. Every once in a while, you'll see stuff.
It's like having a mansion with no emergency doors, right? It looks good on the outside. It looks nice and strong until it catches fire.
Yeah.
Right? And you find out actually how safe it is, right?
Right.
So are we independent or are we just disconnected?
I would say disconnected and independent, or I should say dependent on a lot of these resources that we used to be independent of. Times when it's like, for entrepreneurs, a lot of the times, there's no one, you don't succeed alone. You don't succeed alone. We all have support somewhere, whether it be your mentors, your team, your family, other entrepreneurs, even in the realm of everyday life, you do have people that are helping you along the way. We still are so dependent on other things to get us certain places and do certain things. Case in point, we work further and further away from our homes. You are dependent on your transportation. I don't want to say car because not everybody has a car. You are dependent on your transportation. Let that car, let that train, let that bus break down. And you're going to find out how independent you are not. There's a lot of things that we are dependent on and we don't even think about it. But if we look back, and a lot of things that you are doing independently, you don't think about it until, like I said, a limb is hurting. Then you're like, oh my God, limb hurts. But yeah, you are dependent on stuff. If you are doing stuff independently, you're kind of made to like, why are you walking to work? You know, past 3 bus stops. You got a car in the garage because I want to clear my head. I want to do all of this before I get to my job. But again, you're almost ostracized in a sense for being independent, but then you're not dependent on something if something breaks down. I know I kind of took the scenic route. We are dependent on certain things, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but some of these things is what we would call necessary evil. And I always equate it to being like the college bookstore. A lot of that stuff is expensive, but a lot of the stuff you need in there, and they know that. So they can charge what they want.
That's true. And we buy into it.
Oh, for sure.
Would you say we buy into it, especially over here? So I'm always go with, we live in we have first world problems over here. So do we necessarily have to pay for it, or we just want to pay for it? We want to flex, like being independent, avoiding people is a lot of times that's a flex. I don't need anybody. That's a flex. That's a first world flex. Third world countries don't function like we function.
Right.
They're
Well,
still more.
Like I said, we're taught to be independent.
Yeah. And that's to me, and I think that's what we're getting to. To me, it's to our detriment, in my opinion. It works until it doesn't. It works in some instances, and other instances, it's not good. It's almost like when we're younger, we seek to be more independent. Don't
Right.
want to be around family. You're trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out who E is. So I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to mama. But y'all just saying something because you don't want me to do this and that, right? You're trying to distance yourself. You're trying to be independent because you're trying to figure out who you are. What do you believe instead of what they believe? Do I believe the same thing? I want to be who I am, not who they said I should be. But then the older you get, then you're like, oh, you get nostalgic. Remember them days when we used to be at the barbecue with all the family and the cousins and this and that? Because you don't start thinking like that. And the older you get, the more you want to be back communal.
Yeah, because you're thinking of time is getting away. And I don't mean definitely,
Exactly.
but
Right.
time is getting away. And you are seeing some of those staples passing away. Yeah, the crazy uncle, and aunt and all that kind of stuff. But even when you're little, you're somewhat taught to be independent. Trying to learn how to do certain things yourself. And you're right, it is sometimes to your detriment, because I remember there were times back when I was working a 9 to 5, all of a sudden sometimes you just start feeling overwhelmed. And it's like all this work is piling up on your desk that all of a sudden now you're responsible for this, that, and the other. I remember talking to one of my managers at the time about being overworked and stuff like that. First, I didn't want to say anything. Then it just to the point where I didn't know if I was coming or going. It was just so bad. The response was, well, you were handling everything on your own. I didn't think you needed help. So there you go, to your detriment. And you pull it off and you're meeting on your deadlines. As long as you're doing that, no one's going to really question how are you feeling.
Right. They don't care.
We look at it sometimes in the workplace is that if I need help, then that goes my job security, which we all know doesn't matter at this point. But the more you take on, well, at least it's job security. And that's not necessarily true.
That's definitely not necessarily. Just to touch on what you talked about with regards to entrepreneurs had teams, mentors, and some type of family backing them. You know, I got to come with the stats.
Of course, I'd be surprised if you didn't have